What is up, Fantasyland? I'm JD. This is GOAT District. If you're new to the channel, you're not familiar with us, plain and simple, guys, this is where winners come to hang. We bring you the biggest winners, VIP guests on the regular. I mean, if you're serious about fantasy, if you wake up the morning of your draft just hard, just excited about your draft with one mission, and that's to win your league, this is the channel you need to be subscribed to. You need to smash the like, smash the subscribe right now. We're serious about winning, guys. It's no joke. It's what, July, August, and you're on here watching fantasy football. If you're serious about fantasy, this is the channel you need to follow, whether it's best ball, redraft. Tonight, we're going to cover a bunch of it. Tonight, we're going to get deep, man, into one of my favorite topics. Hashtag always be stacking. This man has taken one of my favorite strategies to the spotlight, has brought it to a whole new level with regards to analysis, strategy, and we have it all tonight, man. He's going to drop a ton of goodness tonight. We're going to hit some NFL news, ton of injuries happening. I'm sure you want to know what to do with these guys, whether you're drafting, trading. Guys, the goodness will keep coming on this channel. Make sure you're subscribed. There's only one thing to do, guys. Let's dance.
GOAT District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up? Thank you for tuning into GOAT District. Guys, huge show tonight. One of our favorite guests back on the show, talking some pretty serious topics, whether you're drafting, trading, whatever it is you're doing. One I talked about in the intro with stacking. Another hot topic right now is the dead zone, the RB dead zone, which we're going to hit on tonight. Dan, how's the flow? How's everything going? I know you're smashing drafts right now. All over the place. So why don't you tell us a bit about that, what goodness you have brewing over there, and how pumped are you for tonight?
Oh, yeah, definitely pumped for tonight. We have a great guest on. We had a lot of fun the first time, and I'm just, I've got several drafts going on, like anybody who's anybody right now, you got to have the drafts going. Just trying to buff up my exposure on those players that I just know are going to be rising up the draft boards as August goes on. So that's what's going on with me. How about you guys?
Theo, how are you, brother? We were talking earlier. It's kind of, once these injuries start, you start looking at your ownership, and when you see Akers and Michael Thomas at the top of your ownership, you're almost like sad. It's like you're like, oh, I did all that. Like 30% of what I did has kind of gone to waste now. How's your ownership going through all these crazy injuries?
I'm knocking wood. My ownership is surviving.
Nice.
If anything happens with Antonio Gibson, I think I'll be in a world of hurt. But
dude,
like many of us, and I'm very exposed to Tyreek Hill, so I'm keeping an eye on this tendonitis. But I just drafted him again today, so YOLO. But yeah, I'm fired up. It's a great time of year. Dan and I found out our draft slots for our FFPC main event. We're split in two teams, and we feel very good about our draw. So it's just, August is going to wind down before you know it, and we're ready to go. Great guest, and I'm fired up just like you guys.
Oh, and Theo, we forgot to mention we have Draft Sharks going tomorrow night too.
Absolutely. Dan and I are in the same Draft Sharks division with Billy Muzio, and we will be on Billy's podcast tomorrow night doing a live draft. I
Nice.
believe it's 25 rounds, correct, Dan?
Yes, 25 rounds, no kickers, no defense, so nice and deep.
Nice and deep. Yeah, it's gonna be a tough one. Some really good competition. Billy and Dan are awesome players, and we also have 2 former main event champions in our division. So there's some analysts, but I got my eyes on those 5 guys. Those are
So
some tough drafters.
a room full of lightweights is basically what you're saying.
It's a tough ass draft. It's a tough ass draft.
Yeah.
Let's put it like that.
All right, guys. We can't waste any time, man. The people are here for this man. He's the director of analytics at Player Profiler, Breakout Finder. You know this man from the Code Breaker, Mr. Josh Larky. Welcome back to the GOAT District, my friend.
Thanks for having me. I am excited. Round 2, when Theo reached out and asked if I could hop on again, I said, August is a busy month, but we're going to make it happen. Here we are. I'm excited. We've got a pretty action-packed show sheet. We've got some good takes for the audience. So let's do this.
Yeah,
Awesome.
We definitely do, man. Loaded with topics, loaded with goodness. We're going to touch on some things tonight, but maybe just, quick reminder. I know most people follow you, but if they missed something recently, just some of your recent goodness that you drop and maybe some excitement you have coming up.
So if you want to keep up with what I'm working on in general, you can follow me on Twitter at JLarkyTweets. I dropped a really good podcast with Neil Gupta, who's one of our summer analytics interns at Player Profiler. And he and I went back and forth and we talked all about winning on the margins and kind of micro strategies that you can enact within your draft and how to kind of gobble up every edge that you possibly can. So we went super in-depth game theory, stacking. I also released a big stacking guide that you can find on playerprofiler.com, where I really dive into stacking and why you have to be doing it when you're in best ball tournaments. And we'll get into that more later. But those are a couple things that just happened. On the horizon, we are pushing out a new DFS module for the good people. So that is just the grind time August project that we are all toiling over, is creating this module that has been months and months in the process. So we had a really successful run with our DFS lineup genius last year. We got pretty close to taking down the Millie Maker 1 week even. So we're back this year. We're going to have more tools and hopefully we're going to win all the subscribers some money. So that's kind of what August is. It's just head down DFS work for the most part.
Yeah, which your head won't come up until December, January, maybe. But a lot of excitement coming up with the DFS stuff. I'm sure just adding to the platform and all the goodness that you guys are offering there. And I gotta say, like, you're downplaying, I think, these, especially the stacking article. For me, this is a cornerstone piece in fantasy football. And if you're not reading that article, go check it out right now, because on this channel, we were, hashtag always be stacking. I mean, we're big fans of the strategy for years now, but like I said, you've really kind of quantified this and defined this strategy in such a way that I think it's important for people to know. And, I think you literally silenced the naysayers, because you always heard those like haters of stacking, right? And now you just lay it all out, and there's no way to deny the benefits of the strategy. And that pod that you had, was it with Neil? Sorry, the gentleman you had on recently.
That was Neil.
Great pod, and even his article was interesting. Kind of looking at what you did for best ball, and then kind of reflecting that into the redraft world.
Yeah, I'm really glad that everyone got to kind of see his mind. I'm super lucky that I have Neil and Michael, 2 analytics interns, to help me out, because my summer would not be the same without them. Just when it comes to everything from trading off stacking research and making sure that anything that I'm doing is actually working out well, and that they can try and break any process I do and confirm whether or not what I'm doing really works. So it's good to have that extra set of eyes. I had a big meeting with the 2 of them this morning, and we just pushed out some updated rankings to our draft kit because as we're about to talk about, a lot happened this past week.
Understatement.
Just a little.
Understatement right there. So guys, shout out to Wheeler, shout out to Anna in the chat. Guys, smash the like button. As we go through this, as we talk about targets, avoids, stacking, give us your thoughts, man, in the comments. We want to hear from you guys. Guys, let's get into the goodness. Like Josh said, there are so many things. This is something I think we're going to start doing on a weekly basis, is go through the NFL news, but kind of in a rapid fire way. And that's just because, like Josh said, man, the notifications on your phone are almost on an hourly basis right now, if not even, less, more frequency with regards to the news and injuries and so on. So guys, let's get right into it. Let's start in Green Bay. I mean, obviously this whole summer's been about Aaron Rodgers and, what he's been wearing and how he's been looking and how he's been feeling. But I'll start this off with you, Josh. Where are you drafting the Packers? And maybe now with Rodgers coming back, how has that adjusted these Green Bay weapons for you when you're drafting?
So I'm just going to make one quick connection. When I was on, I think 3 months ago, I don't remember, one of the three of you had just done a big trade to grab Rodgers in Dynasty. I don't remember who. There we go, JD. And we were talking about how it's just hard to imagine. At the very least, he's going to play probably in Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the two guys that we should get into first would be Aaron Jones and Davonte Adams. And I still think there's an ADP lag in value to be had. I'm just going to, spoiler alert, I have Aaron Jones in PPR leagues as the 5th best overall player. And Davonte Adams is the 7th best overall player. I love how condensed this offense is. It's one of the few offenses where you really know exactly the pecking order at the top, and that those two guys are going to be getting such a huge share of the volume. And it's really hard to find that in many other elite offenses. So right now you can still get them kind of late first. Sometimes they even still leak into the second round. And you just have to be drafting those guys if you see them in the late first round.
Yeah, 100% agree on that.
Yeah. Then with Rodgers, it's kind of funny actually, because I think Rodgers in a vacuum is actually kind of mispriced the opposite direction. And I know that a lot of people get frustrated that I don't like Aaron Rodgers this year, and they go, how can you not like Aaron Rodgers? You like Aaron Jones, you like Davonte Adams, you have to like Rodgers. But the problem is that you frequently have to take Rodgers before somebody like Tom Brady now. And Tom Brady's in a much higher volume offense. He has better overall receiving weapons, where his big three is probably the best big three in the entire sport. So I just can't justify Rodgers over Brady. It's even tough for me to justify Rodgers over Jalen Hurts. I still think that you should continue to smash the draft button on Jalen Hurts and do it before Rodgers, just with the rushing upside of 10 rush attempts per game. So Aaron Rodgers, as this lower volume, incredibly efficient quarterback, really has to have the 7, 8, 9% touchdown rate in order to pay off his current ADP. So I really think the only time that you should draft Aaron Rodgers right now is if you have Davonte Adams. I don't really see another way to justify that ADP currently, where I think it's in the 70s now. I've seen it around kind of 75 is what it seems like it's shaking out at. And that's quite frankly too rich for me.
I love the take on Adams and Jones. It's like a narrow target tree, and they're going to lean on those two guys. We saw Adams smash last year, and it seems like Jones is kind of poised for potentially a career year. We talked about it on the pod. How Jamal Williams is like that sneaky guy out of the equation, where you're talking about 30 plus receptions back-to-back seasons. Those could potentially go to Aaron Jones, and he could absolutely smash. Even with similar rushing volume, if he just absorbs those catches, he should have a smash season. So I'm with you on those two.
And Josh, how did you know I just traded for Jalen Hurts yesterday?
Oh, no way. That is
I mean, for me, fantasy is super easy. As soon as someone I like's value goes down for whatever reason, I mean, it's just it's like crypto, it's like stocks. It's just you get an opportunity to buy more. That's basically all it is for me. And Jalen Hurts, kind of like Rodgers for me. Again, this was supposed to be rapid fire, but I just think that, let's say worst case scenario, he gets traded. He's still going to be a starter. He's still going to have all those, the running weapons. He's still, I mean, for me, it's you just buy these guys at the discount and you're always gaining value if you play it smart. And Rodgers was a perfect example of that. And right now, I think, like you said, Jalen Hurts is next in line for that.
Yeah, it's really tough to see Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I play a lot on Underdog. I've got the shirt on.
Nice.
And he was going in the 110s up until he reported to camp.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're now grabbing him in the 70s, you're basically conceding that you made a 4 or 5 round mistake.
Yeah.
And I just really hate doing that. So it's kind of tough to, if you're in a tournament where people were grabbing Aaron Jones or Adams in the second round, it can be a little difficult to say like, oh, I'm now grabbing them in the first round in this tournament where other people have already taken them round 2. But I feel like it's especially true for Rodgers just because I don't see the upside case unless he has a 9% touchdown rate, which, I mean, no quarterback's ever back-to-back seasons a touchdown rate anywhere remotely close to Rodgers. So he just screams regression candidate.
Wheeler wants to know, with Hurts, are you going naked or are you stacking him with Rager?
I usually stack him with Rager. I just have a hard time going naked quarterback. I think Hurts is one of the only quarterbacks that I think that you can do it with where you're not really losing an edge. So it's hard for me to determine how much you're gaining when you add Rager in the stack. The one guy that I think you shouldn't be stacking him with is Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith's ADP, I think it's getting a little out of hand. Maybe with this new injury that he has, his ADP will drop a little bit, but it's really difficult if the knock on Hurts is that he's inaccurate and he's going to have low pass volume because he rushes so much. Why are we pushing his wide receiver 1 into the 60s and or low 70s of ADP?
Good point.
That's what I have a hard time with, is that you're kind of, there's sort of this disjointed connection of Hurts is so good on the ground and we don't think he's a good passer. Oh, but his rookie wide receiver, yeah, that guy is really going to feast, even though there's Goddard and there's Ertz and there's Rager and there's Sanders and there's Gainwell and there's all these other guys that are going to be getting some type of receiving work. So I really like Hurts with Rager the best. If I could choose kind of any combo of that. I've done some Hurts Goddard, but Goddard just right now with Ertz there too, it's a little bit difficult to see his total breakthrough role. So Rager still, I mean, great ADP in the 130s.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Rager's cheap.
Okay, I promise we'll do more rapid fire as we go through this. It's our first attempt, guys. There's a lot of goodness, but going to Theo, you had a nice question here with regards to tertiary pieces with like AJ Dillon, similar to what Kevin is touching on, like MVS and oh wow, I'm blanking on his name. What's the other receiver?
Lazard.
Yeah.
Amari Rogers.
Like, and again, Josh, like, just I want to know your thoughts on these guys, but I find like even their ADPs like haven't really moved up. They're still like way deep in these drafts. You're finding MVS and Lazard. What are your thoughts on these kind of secondary or third option in that offense?
The one that I'm most intrigued by as the ADPs are shaking out, and as Cobb, who I thought I was going to be above consensus on Randall Cobb, I think I have him in the 170s for my best available players in redraft, but now he's kind of going in the 150s to 160s. And that seems pretty high to me considering who Randall Cobb is at this stage of his career. I think Amari Rogers is a pretty good deal because his ADP's dropped a little bit. It's around 200 now on most platforms. And this was a third round receiver that they supposedly had a round 2 grade on. It's kind of the only receiver with any type of substantial draft capital from the last few years for the Packers. So I really like Amari Rogers grabbing the slot. I don't know if Cobb is going to start there the first few weeks or what's going to shake out there, but the case the case for Rodgers is that you're probably going to have a Cobb injury at some point if he gets too many snaps. So therefore, they're probably going to snap count him, in which case, who else is playing the slot? I like the rookie going at pick 200, playing with a Hall of Fame quarterback who you know is going to be out on the field getting real work. We know that he's dynamic after the catch. So I think that he's really the best option right now where you can get, rookie fever for some reason just really didn't hit Rodgers. So I like the Aaron Rodgers, Amari Rogers late connection quite a bit.
What about AJ Dillon?
Sense.
I'm sorry, Dan. What about AJ Dillon, Josh? What way are you treating Dillon? Is he a target of yours or one that you're considering kind of at ADP?
Yeah, I think Dillon's fine at ADP. I'm not super excited about drafting him. I would say I'm around just average exposure to Dillon. I can see the case for him where he's a touchdown monster and he hits 10 touchdowns and he takes some of that goal line work from Aaron Jones. But I really don't see the receiving upside for him. And we've just seen so little out of him that, yes, in theory, the 250-pound guy that's just as fast as 205-pound Aaron Jones, on paper, that sounds great. But I don't think we've really seen enough to know that he's actually in any way a better runner than Aaron Jones in any phase of the game. So that's kind of what's preventing me from running away and saying, oh, if Jamal Williams was good in this offense, then AJ Dillon, he was a round 2 pick. He must be better. So that's kind of why I have sort of tempered enthusiasm with Dillon, but it's not like I'm avoiding him. I think he's fine where he goes.
Yeah, but the thing I like best about Dillon is just the fact that the Aaron Jones has not been, exactly the picture of health. He gets nicked up at least once a season, and the Green Bay medical staff, when somebody gets nicked up, they hold them out for 5 weeks. So, that's where I see the value of Dillon, is that I think there's going to be some point during the season where he's going to get like a 3 to 5 game run without Aaron Jones. I might be wrong on that, but if I'm right, I think Dillon could definitely smash on those weeks and be worthwhile where you pick him.
That's a good point. The worry I have is that if Aaron Jones goes out, that Kylan Hill gets a lot of the receiving work. He's kind of this black box where, no one knows anything about him. And he had like a 15 target game this past year in college, but then he only played 3 games. But then if you look at his game logs, he actually only really played 2 games and then commanded almost 30 targets, I believe, in those 2 games. So he's kind of a weird running back. He was taken in the 7th round, so that probably doesn't mean that much. But at the same time, when the starting running back who just got his massive extension was a day 3 pick himself and was undersized in Aaron Jones, you have to think that if there was a coaching staff that would go purely on merit, it might be the Packers for the running back room. So that's my one fear with maybe Dillon doesn't quite get unleashed, but I do think there's that chance. We saw it last year in that one game. Was it the Titans game where it was the snow game and he had 20-something fantasy points and just kind of ran all over them? So I can see it with Dillon.
Yeah, it's an interesting point with Hill, and it's maybe that's just the Packers' MO. Like even Jones, he gets like last year he was like 50% snap guy. The year before, I think he was like a 60% snap guy. So it seems like they want to rotate their running backs and get them in. And Dillon would potentially get a huge share, but I think there would be another back, mixed in at least receiving wise. So be interesting to see. But if Dillon does get some targets, he could absolutely smash. He didn't see it at Boston College, but I'm not so sure that they would not use him as a receiver if Jones was out. But we'll be interested to see what happens with Hill during preseason.
Kylan Hill, the first and last Devy player I ever draft in any Devy league I'm in. That was in Pigs 3, and I'm like, why did I even draft this guy? I don't get the Devy thing. Guys, we got to do rapid fire because right now we're failing miserably at the rapid fire aspect of this segment. We want to get to the goodness, to Josh's goodness. So real quick, obviously people wondering with the Akers injury, Josh, Henderson and Xavier Jones, where are you on these guys right now where they're currently going?
Darrell Henderson, I think he's kind of a round 5 pick. I think kind of every few days that should go up a little bit. every few days they don't sign a veteran. His ADP should tick up a little, and I'm okay with that. I don't want anything to do with Xavier Jones, Jake Funk, Raymond Clay. Nothing. I don't believe that these guys are necessarily going to have any kind of role. It just feels like in that range, just grab a guy like Rashad Penny, who looks like the number 2 running back behind Carson, who can never stay healthy. Or even later on, you can grab Jerick McKinnon, who looks like he's probably going to be the number 2 running back in Kansas City. So I don't see it with these guys. I think they're just being propped up because of the depth chart. So stayaways completely for me after Henderson.
Yeah, I don't mind Xavier if he falls, but he is starting to get up into the territory where it's, there are just a lot better picks out there.
Scooting over to Indy with my Colts, obviously the offense being without Wentz for a bit, obviously debatable on all that, but obviously they're going to be without him for a period of time. Mm-hmm. So anyone bump up, bump down? I mean, now we have the injury of Nelson as well, who someone was asking in the chat, so I apologize who that was. But what are your thoughts on the Colts right now with the current situation?
I mean, you have to kind of drop all of them. It's unfortunate because it's like, oh, we have to sort of drop the receivers because of Wentz. Oh, God, now Jonathan Taylor has to get dropped because not only is the offense going to be worse with a worse quarterback, but now the best left guard in the game is out for similar to however long Wentz is out. I think the one guy whose ADP probably shouldn't really change, kind of the only one, would be Michael Pittman. It really seems like they want him to be that alpha wide receiver 1. That's the first read frequently. And generally those guys they're kind of quarterback proof, where no matter who the quarterback is, that Pittman's going to be getting his targets if they really view him as the wide receiver 1, and that if you have a less experienced quarterback who's either uncomfortable with pressure and not going through read progressions and is just going to kind of target the first read more often, and Pittman's the guy that kind of helps him in terms of getting more targets potentially. So I think that he's kind of the one guy where you shouldn't really change your thoughts on him unless you truly think he's terrible and that he's not the top receiver there. And then everyone else, I think you have to downgrade them. I mean, Wentz is borderline undraftable right now in almost every league format. So yeah, it's kind of a tough scene to have the double blow of QB left guard.
Our first on the clock of the night. 1-word answer, gentlemen. 1-word answer. I'm going to go around. Josh as our guest. Taylor or Chubb?
Taylor.
Theo?
I'm still if I'm on the clock. I'm still probably going Taylor, but it's like taking the guy with the banged up offensive line versus the guy with the best offensive line in football. So
closer than it was, right?
Probably the wrong answer, but I'll go Taylor.
Dan, any different?
Yeah, I'll go Chubb.
Nice.
And I am not the world's biggest Chubb apologist by any stretch, but I think just the fact he's run behind that good offensive line, and he's got a coach that's going to feed him the ball, and just like Taylor, I'm not sure how much of the passing game work he's going to get. So to me, they're kind of the same guy, except one of them has a quarterback and an offensive line, and the other one doesn't.
I'm going to go back to Philly just because I want to make sure we answer our peeps, right? That's why we're here at the end of the day. And going back to Philly, Gainwell or Boston Scott as Philly passing down, or will Miles go Phil 3 down back?
I think it's going to be kind of a split between Sanders and Gainwell with the third down, long down and distance, those types of situations. I don't really think that they're going to trust the round 5 rookie who hasn't actually played since 2019 with that kind of work right out the gate. But I do think he's going to get some of that at some point. And I just don't think Boston Scott is a particularly good running back. I know a lot of people like him because he looks like an everyman and he's shifty, but I'm going Gainwell over Scott.
All right. I'm going to hit this last team because I want to selfishly ask you about a player, and then I'm going to pass it over to Theo to start hammering you with the goodness. But obviously, Michael Thomas being out, I hear you and I share some pain with regards to ownership percentages with guys like Akers and Thomas. But I'm curious dynasty-wise. I know tonight we're focusing best ball redraft, but dynasty-wise, I'm sure a lot of people wondering what to do. I know personally, I've sold 2 shares now. One was for Rondell Moore and a third. The other one is for Smith, Devonta Smith and a third. My logic just being that if I'm losing, I personally feel that these guys a year from now are ahead of Thomas anyways in value. So I feel like I'm gaining there. But if there is a difference and you still consider Thomas ahead, I feel like the upside on those guys, between now and the time that Thomas comes back, obviously Smith now being injured. And yes, I accepted a trade before I looked at the latest news on that. I didn't realize he was injured, but I want to know your thoughts just real quick with Thomas dynasty. If you whoever's watching right now, if they hold Thomas, what are you doing with it? What's your suggestion with the situation?
Michael Thomas, if he's on your dynasty team right now, you need to be selling him. Think about a few weeks from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, his value is just going to go down because he's not going to come back. And then when he comes back, it's not even like it's the most desirable situation to begin with. We don't even know who the quarterback is going to be. He's probably going to be on a snap count when he first returns. I just really don't see the case where Michael Thomas is gaining value the next few months is a really tough one for me to understand. And I think it's more likely that people realize, wow, when you're in your late 20s and you have an ankle injury that you didn't take care of and ultimately needed surgery several months later than you should have gotten it, wow, this is a rough timetable. And I think it's kind of just a lost season in general. So I would say the actionable advice, sell him now, and then maybe you can just buy him back a year from now, depending on how he finishes the year. But his value, it's not going to go up for at least 2 months.
Aspire Sports saying his best days are behind him. And that's exactly kind of my logic there. Theo, Dan, I know we talked in the DMs about this. Obviously, I annoyed you guys with my question on these guys. Like, where do you guys feel that the values are with these guys? Anything to add with Thomas and what people should be doing in Dynasty?
Yeah, I'll throw out there, if you can't get him sold right now for a price that you like, then I am okay with holding him until he gets close to returning, because there are just so many fantasy players out there who are just so overly optimistic when it comes to injuries, and they think, Thomas is going to step right back in and he's going to elevate the whole offense and everything's going to be fine. And, and especially if that same fantasy owner is the one who is really hurting at wide receiver, then that's going to be your target right there. But I do think that, there's always a, kind of that surge of optimism that comes just before a player comes back. And often it gets crushed, but you just got to get that player sold before the optimism gets crushed again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I sold my last Thomas share last week. I packaged him with Nick Chubb to get Tyreek Hill, which was a move that maybe 3 months ago people would have said that you're overpaying. But I think now I'm getting, one of the top wide receivers in football for basically Nick Chubb. I think there's a chance Michael Thomas never plays another snap for the Saints. Nothing would surprise me with Michael Thomas' situation. The guy should have gotten surgery right after the playoff loss. Instead, he's getting surgery during the preseason. He has all these, problems with his teammates, problems with his head coach. He's already gotten paid the big contract. I think there's so many red flags with Michael Thomas. And plus, Josh brought up the fact that he's already past the age apex that a lot of these wide receivers start to fall off anyway. So, and we talked about in the pre-show, he was such a perfect fit with Drew Brees. His style matched up with Drew Brees perfectly. Short little routes, the slants. He was a perfect match with Drew Brees. You already had some questions if it's Taysom Hill and him. So, yeah, I'm glad to be rid of Michael Thomas. I enjoyed the points he got me when he was in his prime, but I'm happy to be out of the Thomas business.
All right, Theo, I'm going to pass this to you because I kind of hogged that first segment there, just wanting to speed through what we did not speed through because we're already at 35 minutes. But guys, we're about to get into the goodness. Make sure you stick around, smash the like, smash the subscribe. Theo, I'm going to pass it to you. Let's hit the stacking. I mean, like I said, Josh is doing something, I think it's like I said, a kind of a staple in fantasy football when it comes to where he's putting stacking in strategies. Because I think that a lot of people talked about it, but we never really had the quantifiable reasons why we were doing this and how exactly to do it properly. So Theo, let's pick his brain, man, because this is what it's for.
No, absolutely. And I retweeted this article this morning. It was one of the best articles I've read all summer long. Josh basically put out the best, one of the best stacking advice, like JD said, that anyone will ever read. So make sure to check that out. So we'll jump right back into it. What is your approach with stacking in major tournaments? Like underdog, but then also in tournaments like the football guys on FFPC, the main event with FFPC, big tournament settings.
So any kind of large field tournament, you really have to stack. And kind of a high level idea of why you should be stacking is what you're really looking for are the ceiling outcomes. You want, if you're in a huge tournament, you need several players on your team to greatly exceed their ADP. You can't really win a tournament if you're like, oh, I didn't really miss on any picks. No one did that well, but at least I didn't have any total duds. No. You need to hit on one, maybe even two players that are kind of like a league winner in terms of where they finished based on where they were drafted. And the way to do that is with stacking, because let's just say that Tyreek Hill greatly outperforms his ADP. Let's say that Tyreek Hill has the Davonte Adams season from 2020, and that's his 2021. Who else did Davonte Adams carry, and vice versa? Who carried Davonte Adams? Aaron Rodgers. It's really tough for one of these elite receivers to smash ADP and not have their quarterback do the same. So if you had Rodgers Adams, think about how many times last year you got a 30-point performance from both Rodgers and from Adams. And that's really what you want to do, is that when you're stacking, you don't need to get two players correct. The way to think about it is that you're getting one offense correct. And that, sure, you could say, all right, I grabbed Keenan Allen in the 3rd round. I'm not going to grab Justin Herbert in the 7th round because, Keenan Allen might not have a good season, which is true. Keenan Allen could totally bust. But if your round 3 Keenan Allen pick busted, are you even really winning any tournaments to begin with? No, you're not going to have a totally busted 3rd round pick and still take down the tournament. What you should be doing is thinking about, okay, I took Keenan Allen in the 3rd round. I think he's going to have a really good season. For him to beat ADP, I think he's going to be a top 5, top 6 wide receiver. Let's say that Keenan Allen has 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns. Pretty tough to see Justin Herbert flopping at ADP. In fact, he's probably going to do really well based on where he was drafted. So that's kind of the idea behind stacking, is that rather than needing to hit on multiple individual pieces, like let's say that I had Tyreek Hill and Justin Herbert. For that tournament team to do really well, I need the Chiefs offense to be totally cooking. And I need the Chargers offense to be totally cooking. It's much easier just to say, all right, I have Tyreek Hill, I grabbed Mahomes because I think the Chiefs will be good. And that's really what you're doing, is that in a world of fantasy football, there's injuries, there's infinite variables to think about, but that when you stack, it's basically like a 2-for-1 deal, where it's not 2 players anymore, it's one offense. And I think that's the huge theoretical piece that is kind of eye-opening to a lot of people, is that they sort of think of stacking like, oh, but you should have diversified your risk. And that in this context, it's not really diversifying your risk. It's actually just giving yourself more variables to worry about, because now you're worrying and rooting on more different offenses. So hopefully that on a high level can help people understand why they might want to read this article, where they go, oh, you know what? I hadn't thought of it like that. Maybe I'm actually not diversifying risk when I avoid stacking at all costs, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are still just vehemently anti-stacking.
Sorry, Theo. I just want to say I love how you said it was like betting against yourself. And that's exactly like that to me. We always said you're telling a story, and then all of a sudden you're trying to correct your story in the middle of your draft. It just doesn't make any sense. Sorry, Theo, go ahead, buddy.
No, I love the term ceiling outcomes, and it's basically when you're in these tournaments, you're not trying to be fourth. You're willing to finish later in order to finish first. So you're giving yourself more exposure to a good thing happening twice. I mean, I love that phrase. Just one thing not on the show sheet. Stacking in a tournament like the Underdog, where it's an 18 round, or FFPC, where it's essentially 18 plus a kicker and a defense. What is your ideal number of players to pair with the quarterback? Is it just a single correlation like a skinny stack, or are you looking at these full on quarterback plus two players, quarterback plus 3 players potential stacks?
So from my research, and I only looked at the Underdog Best Ball Mania tournament from last season, which had about 40,000 entries. I was able to get access to some incredibly detailed data from that. So I just dove headfirst into that. And the two kind of most optimal combinations throughout the entire tournament, whether it was the early round of the tournament where you're just trying to finish top 2 in your 12-person division, to the later rounds of a tournament where suddenly you just keep pooling the best teams together, and suddenly it becomes kind of like a DFS game where each week you have to outcompete more and more teams. And the two optimal combinations were either 3 skinny stacks, which is where you take 3 quarterbacks. Generally, you're not going to take them too early. So this is not saying like Mahomes, Josh Allen, Tua. That's a lot of draft capital. But if you go 3 mid to late round quarterbacks and take 1 pass catcher on each of their teams, that kind of so in the early rounds, you had to finish top 2 of 12 teams to advance, which is 1 in 6. The teams that had 3 skinny stacks advanced at about a 1 in 5 clip. So already you're making a 1 in 6 equation, a 1 in 5 equation. And then the other one was 2 double stacks. So you have 2 quarterbacks. So maybe we could do Josh Allen, and we'll stick with Tua Tagovailoa. He's kind of fun. So in that case, you might have Josh Allen with Stephon Diggs and Dawson Knox. So that could be 2 players on Allen's team where if either of them has a good game, it's very likely Josh Allen does. And then the other one is you could have Tua with Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle. So that would be an idea of having 2 double stacks. So those were the 2 combos where you basically make a 1 in 6 chance of advancing, a 1 in 5 chance. And then also in those later rounds of the tournament, you have potentially even a greater advantage over the competition, that the numbers were actually even more promising once it becomes kind of like a 1-week DFS game. Because as we all know from if you're playing DraftKings, you need to stack. You want that 1-week correlation. So it helps you in the front end and the back end.
I think that's great. There was one negative correlation that your article found out. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? It was a quarterback running back correlation.
Sure. So pretty much any quarterback receiver, no matter who it is, if it's the receiver 1, 2, 3, 4, tight end 1, the backup tight end, all those positions are very positively correlated with the quarterback. And I know that might sound scary. What is positive correlation? All that means is that they move together. So if the quarterback has a good day and the wide receiver is positively correlated, there's a good chance the quarterback or the receiver has a good day. If the quarterback has a bad day, probably the receiver has a bad day. The quarterback running back, it's very slight, but it is negatively correlated, which means they move oppositely. So if the running back has a huge game, that probably means they had a couple rushing touchdowns, which are directly taking from the quarterback. Vice versa, if the quarterback has a big day and has 3 passing touchdowns, there's probably fewer rushing touchdowns for the running back. So I think the actionable piece from this is that because it's very slightly negative, so it's not necessarily that huge of a deal, it doesn't mean that you can't draft Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott on the same team. But overall, for starting running backs, more often than not, that is not going to be the optimal strategy, if that makes sense. So it doesn't mean it can't happen. And there's some pass catching running backs that aren't going to follow this rule. So the highest ADP running back on the Cardinals is Chase Edmonds. Do I think that Chase Edmonds is going to have a huge day because of goal line carries when he's had one goal line carry in his entire NFL career? No. Chase Edmonds is probably a great guy to stack with Kyler Murray, where you know that when Chase Edmonds has a big day, he's probably getting a lot of catches and probably a receiving touchdown. But that it's more like Dalvin Cook, Kirk Cousins, Ezekiel Elliott, Dak Prescott. These types of moves are probably, in the long run, not the optimal play. And then I'm actually going to get into one more type of negative correlation. And I think that this one is actually super important for people to understand, because this is huge with best ball, is the negative correlation week to week between receivers on the same team. With the idea being that if a receiver has 2 touchdowns, those are 2 touchdowns that cannot go to any other receiver. So yes, if you had Tyler Lockett and Russell Wilson, and Lockett has 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns, as we saw multiple times last year, Wilson has a huge day. You know who doesn't have a huge day, though, would be DK Metcalf. It's really difficult for Lockett to have his 200-yard, 3-touchdown game and then be like, oh, yeah, by the way, it's okay. Metcalf had 100 yards and 2 touchdowns himself. That doesn't happen very often. So in best ball, I really like grabbing multiple receivers on the same team, especially late. So if I have Tyreek Hill on my team, in season-long correlation, Tyreek Hill and Demarcus Robinson are probably going to be positively correlated in the sense that if one has a good season, there's a good chance the other might have a good season because the Chiefs are just good. But week to week, they're actually probably going to be the opposite, where if Tyreek Hill is a good game, he's stealing touchdowns from Robinson. So if you're in best ball, that's a great pairing to have Tyreek Hill, and then at the end of your draft, grab a Demarcus Robinson where, oh man, this is a horrible week. I can't believe it. Tyreek Hill got me 3 catches for 20 yards. He's not cracking my lineup. There's a pretty good chance that in that specific week, due to the negative correlation week to week, that it's because Demarcus Robinson went bananas and he had a great matchup. So a couple other ones I like is if you grab Judy or Sutton, I love taking KJ Hamler at the end of your draft, where if Judy or Sutton has a bad week, there's a pretty good chance KJ Hamler is one. Yeah, there's a good chance like KJ Hamler has his like 100-yard and 1 or 2 touchdowns. So that's really where you can gain edges on the margins, being aware of how to successfully leverage correlation and stacking. And that for this double wide receiver tandem, even if you don't have them stacked with a quarterback, it's still good. So let's just say that you whiffed on Mahomes and you had Tyreek Hill. You should still shoot for Demarcus Robinson and have 2 Kansas City receivers. If you whiff on, it's kind of a funny example. If you whiff on Bridgewater or Locke, or you just said, you know what, I don't like them, but you already had Sutton from earlier in your draft, grab KJ Hamler. Because let's just say that the whole Denver offense flops. That's what you're worried about, right? I mean, it might be a terrible offense. Then why were you taking Cortland Sutton in the first place if you thought it was such a bad offense?
Yeah.
That's kind of why it's like you can't bet on yourself. And like, oh, you took a receiver on that team early. You are now obligated to keep attacking that team because you have planted your flag. Those early rounds, you are flag planting. And that's kind of what you should think about it as is your round 1 pick, round 2 pick, round 3 pick, etc. You are planting your flag. That is the player that I think is going to outperform ADP. So why not keep making rational decisions from that point forward with which teams you like?
Sorry, Josh. Anna's asking, where can I read more about this? She obviously went to grab her popcorn while we were giving her the directives. So, guys, Player Profiler. First of all, Player Profiler, we talk about on the regular on the show. Must have in every way. Josh Larky, obviously a big reason for that, but all the analytics, the goodness, the player profilers, player profiles. Just everything you need when you're looking at analytics. And so Anna, check that out. And the questions are coming in. So, Theo, I apologize. I'm going to pass it right back to you, but I do want to go to Wheeler's question and I'm going to add to it because, again, this is all important. He's asking RB tight end, negative correlation, question mark. Is that a good stack? And I'm going to ask you because I had this discussion with Theo and Dan in a draft that we're in. Where are you with drafting RBs on the same team? Like, Buffalo, for example, like maybe grabbing Moss and Singletary. Give us your thoughts on the handcuff aspect.
Cool. So just to quickly hit on the running back tight end, I actually haven't dove super intensely into that. I know from reading prior research that others have done that, yes, generally running backs and tight ends take from each other because they often operate kind of in the short to intermediate range of the field with their targets. I would say that Swift Hawkinson is a good stack to have. I like that one. I actually kind of enjoy if I go kind of the trash quarterback strategy in best ball and I have two kind of bad quarterbacks, I can grab Jared Goff in the final round. And if I have Swift and Hawkinson, you could potentially have 40 to 45% target share of that offense tied up in players that where with Hawkinson, he's at tight end. There's just a lot of scarcity there. And it's not like Hawkinson needs to have 1,200 yards to crush his ADP. And then with Swift, he's also going to have the goal line carries and that he's a running back. So I kind of like the idea of Swift Hawkinson where it's a sneaky one where very few offenses run through not the wide receivers at all. But Detroit really looks like that. And then to hit the other, remind me of the other
running backs, just running backs, handcuffing. Does it matter, where that second running back maybe goes versus the first one?
Yeah, great. So, also to answer Anna's question, it's called The Complete Guide to Stacking in Best Ball. You can find that on playerprofiler.com. The podcast I mentioned with Neil it's called Daniel Jones Best Ball Hero. You just go to the Roto Underworld podcast feed and you're going to see from several episodes ago, you'll see Codebreaker Season 1, Episode 11, Daniel Jones Best Ball Hero. And one of the things that we break down, Neil and I, is that yes, in redraft, you probably shouldn't be handcuffing because you're only going to start one of these guys a week. And I mean, if the starter's healthy, you're never starting the backup. Best ball is kind of a different story. And in that episode, we highlighted a few running back pairings that we actually think are positive EV for best ball. So one example of that would be Damian Harris and James White. And that you grab both of those players on the same best ball team. Because if you think about it week to week, if you're in a redraft league, are you ever starting James White? Can you ever confidently say this week, there it is. This is his 9 target game where he has 75 receiving yards and a touchdown. Pretty difficult to pinpoint. If you're starting him, you're going to get a lot of like 2 to 3 point weeks, most likely. So in redraft, it doesn't really make sense because assuming Damian Harris is healthy, when are you starting James White? But in best ball, Damian Harris isn't very expensive. Neither is James White. And what you can say is that I'm locking up 15 points a week, pretty much guaranteed. And that you have 2 running back slots and they're precious and you have to fill them. And if Damian Harris doesn't get the job done, there's a good chance that they're in comeback mode and James White is so completely outperforming his expectation and vice versa. If Damian Harris has a 20-point game, James White does nothing for you. But with the draft capital that you're investing, it's not like you grab Damian Harris in the 8th or 9th round and James White in the 16th round thinking these are the 2 running backs I'm starting every single week. Whereas in redraft, you kind of have to do that where the running backs, you really have to pick and choose this week. This is who starts. So I like kind of the pass catching, non-pass catching handcuffs a lot. One more that I think is interesting, Derrick Henry, Darrington Evans. No, we don't really know what Darrington Evans' role is. I have no idea. I know he's a far better pass catcher than Henry. I know he's a 3rd round pick, and I know he's really talented and looks like an all-purpose back. Now, if you take those 2, what you shouldn't be thinking is I'm doing this because what if Derrick Henry tears his ACL? Oh, then I've got Darrington Evans. No. If that happens, you lost your round 1 pick. your team is donezo. What you should be thinking is Derrick Henry is the most volatile running back in the NFL week to week. We know this. We play fantasy football. He's either getting you 25 fantasy points or he's getting you like 11 or 9. There's not a lot of average performances from Henry. And the idea is that, let's say that Henry has one of his clunkers where he has 20 rushes for 85 yards, no touchdowns. There's a good chance maybe Evans has a receiving touchdown or he's getting targeted, and that we don't expect their roles within the same game to be anything remotely similar. And that's a nice way to say, on the off chance those 3 to 4 weeks that my round 1 running back isn't in my optimal lineup, there's a good chance Darrington Evans saves me and is vaulted into that one of those 2 precious running back slots. So that's kind of the idea behind handcuffing and best ball, because I know at this point it's kind of been beaten to death that you shouldn't really be handcuffing for the most part in a managed redraft league. Like, you shouldn't be taking Zeke and Pollard. You shouldn't be taking Cook and Madison. But that in best ball, there's certain unique combinations where, based on the opportunity cost that it takes to draft them, it's a savvy move to bet on that backfield and knowing each week one of those 2 guys is going to pop.
Especially if you're depending on an injury.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Darrington going in that 14th round, similar to Penny in that range where you're personally avoiding a guy like Xavier Jones.
Yeah, I think it's far easier to see how a Darrington Evans can fit into your build. I mean, how does Xavier Jones fit into your build? I don't even know what his role is. Is he the pass down running back? Is he purely a breather back? Is he going to usurp Darrell Henderson?
Gosh, have you not seen what McVay said today? Come on, man.
Well, yeah. So, he's getting a breather, but yeah, that's just basically if you're taking Xavier Jones, I think it's a bet against Henderson. You certainly don't want to be taking them both together, but you're just basically betting that.
We lose Dan.
Yeah, I think Dan goes out. We'll pivot over. Josh, quickly, what are your favorite stacks right now on Underdog, whether they're skinny or in general? Like, what are the ones you think are going to have positive EV and could win people some serious cash this year?
I have a few written down. So first off, you have to stack Seahawks. Just like we talked about at the start of the show, where we love having the offense like Green Bay, where we know that Aaron Jones and Davonte Adams have huge roles, write it in stone. Same with the Seattle Seahawks. We know that Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are going to be on the field taking the majority of the targets when they're out there. I love having a double stack, single stack. Just give me at least one of those guys and then throw in someone like a Gerald Everett. I think that's a great double stack to have either Metcalf or Lockett with Everett. Plus, you solve the tight end position where, no one knows what's going to happen with tight ends each week, but there's a good chance that if Wilson goes off, Everett has a nice week. Another one is Brady with Antonio Brown and Gronkowski. I think Evans and Godwin are potentially a little mispriced, where at least last year in the 8 games that Evans, AB, and Godwin overlapped, they all had between a 17 to 19% target share. And Antonio Brown was actually in the middle of that. He had a target share that was above Godwin and just below Evans. So if you can get Antonio Brown several rounds later, why not do that? We know it's a super high volume pass attack. So I really like the AB Gronk combo. Gronk's a touchdown monster. He's been that every year of his career. He was that last year as well. This is a red zone threat. That's a great stack. A couple other ones, Mahomes Hill. I love, especially on Underdog, if I grab Tyreek Hill with the 8th or 9th pick, every 2 to 3 times I do that, Mahomes slips to the early 4th. And I really hate going QB round 3, but when you can get Mahomes round 4, I really like that. I think that's just, there's no stack better than Mahomes Hill. Diggs Allen is kind of tough to get, but that's a really good one. Some other really attainable ones. I really like the double stack of Trevor Lawrence with ETN and then just any of those three receivers. Plant your flag on Chark, Chenault, Marvin Jones. This is the target leader. And then grab ETN as well, because if it's a good offense, all three of those guys are probably going to do really well. And that ETN has a really substantial passing game role, most likely. Tua with two of his three receivers. I think that's a really fun stack. So we grab Waddle, Fuller, Waddle, Parker, Cousins, Jefferson, or Cousins, Thielen. I think Thielen's a little bit rich at his ADP, but if you know that you're doing some type of stacking, I think it makes it more okay, because it's another offense we think will be above average that's very consolidated. And then the final one is if you just say, Josh, I want the easy stack. I don't even want to think about it. I just want to bank on it. All right. You have an early first round pick. Do whatever you want in the first round. Later second round, grab Darren Waller. This is, of course, in the FFPC, you need kind of a late first pick, so then it's kind of flipped. But if you're in tight end premium, you kind of want that mid to late first. If you're in not tight end premium, the early first round picks, you get Waller at the end of the second. And then you can grab Bryan Edwards, Henry Ruggs, Kenyon Drake, I think, is a fun guy to sneak in there with Derek Carr. So that's kind of the least expensive stack you can get is the Raiders, where they play in a dome. The defense is terrible. They're going to have to pass a lot. And I think that's a good stack.
Theo,
That's
can I just squeeze one more? I just got to ask him about one more stack. I love all those stacks. The Chicago stack. I've been telling Dan and Theo, like, I just can't stop. Like, I agree with you with the Hill Mahomes, by the way. When the first puppy was running out, I signed up for as many as I could before the show started, like the slow drafts. And I'm pretty sure out of the whatever, I'm pretty sure like 80% of those were with Mahomes and Hill, because it was just too easy to grab Mahomes. He was falling at such a value. But I want to know your thoughts on the Chicago stack before we kind of move forward, because I feel like you can get A-Rob early, then hit Mooney, and then, you know, whether you want to sprinkle RBs or not, you can hit that quarterback in Fields later on.
So Chicago's an interesting one. I was kind of mixed, and I'd done some research, and it looked like a pretty good stack. And then, fortunately, JJ Zacharyson put out this awesome podcast where he broke down that with rookie quarterbacks, none of them ever have supported two super fantasy relevant options. And it kind of made me rethink doing the Fields double stack with Robinson and Mooney. Basically, you've never had two guys that are both in like the wide receiver 1, 2, 3 category. It hasn't happened before. Probably the closest to it actually was Burrow with Higgins and Boyd, where it was kind of close prior to injury. But that just in general, if you have a high-end guy like an Allen Robinson who we think is going to be a wide receiver 1, then it's really tough for a rookie quarterback to support another guy. So what I really like doing is either going Fields, Robinson, leave it, or Fields, Robinson, Kmet,
yeah,
or Fields, Robinson, Graham even, or Fields, Mooney, Kmet, or Fields, Mooney, Graham.
Okay.
So it's kind of a consolidated target share there, at least guys that we know of. So I think it's a good stack in that sense, where we can pinpoint a few guys that are going to do well. I still think Jimmy Graham is, I said it last year, saying it this year, he's still a sneaky, like, final round dart throw tight end. I mean, the guy I think he had 8 touchdown catches last year and 50 overall receptions. He's not going away. Kmet was drafted because he was an elite blocker. I feel like there's kind of this perception in the fantasy community. He's sort of this darling of like, oh, Kmet, he's going to be such a good tight end this year in fantasy. Maybe, but we know that Jimmy Graham for years and years and years has been an elite red zone threat and was last year. So I think you can kind of take your pick that Kmet usurps him and takes on more receiving work, or you say, you know what, Kmet still has the blocking roll down, and then grab Graham at the end. But I do like, if you're doing it, it has to be Fields. There's no way Dalton lasts more than 3 to 4 weeks this season. So I really like Fields with those guys, where at least with Robinson, his ADP kind of reflects more of a Dalton type quarterback in that offense. And I kind of like that when you're stacking Fields with Robinson, where whenever Fields takes over, Robinson could just be an absolute monster.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like, he's got that round 1 upside is basically what you're saying, even though you're getting him in that second round.
Yeah, it would not surprise me, probably wouldn't surprise anyone, if Allen Robinson leads the entire NFL in target share among receivers. He can legitimately be the 29-30% target share type of player. We've seen him in the high 20s multiple seasons. And that's what I like is what if suddenly you get that type of target share in an offense that's throwing at a decent amount with a competent quarterback?
I think that's great takes. That was some awesome stuff on stacking. There was one other piece this summer you did. It was actually a podcast on your Codebreaker podcast, and I thought it was excellent. And everybody should check it out. But we've had a lot of talk about the running back dead zone, and I thought that this was the best piece out there in the entire summer by anybody in fantasy football about the running back dead zone. You basically looked at it as an analytical perspective, and you came away with some really, really sharp takeaways. Can you elaborate on that and talk about the players you should be targeting and the players you should be avoiding in that dead zone?
So with the running back dead zone, there's a few things going on here. And one of the reasons it was intriguing to me is it seemed hard to believe that a running back's fantasy ADP dictated how they did. I never saw the connection where, if he's a round 3 to round 6 pick, that's the dead zone. And I thought, it doesn't really make sense. I don't think anyone is telling these round 3 through 6 running backs, hey, by the way, you're a dead zone running back. And then sure enough, it's just eating away at them all season. And they have a terrible season. And when I dove into the numbers, it turns out that really what these round 3 through 6 ADPs often indicate is that running back's a scarce position. You have 2 to 3 starting receivers on every team. You only have 1 starting running back. So already it's a scarce position. And we know that it's a league-winning position. Generally, the 2 to 4 highest scoring players in fantasy in any season, among the running back receivers, they're probably going to be the running backs. We saw that last year where Adams was the one difference-making receiver, and then we had Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry. So we had multiple running backs that were giving you 20-plus points a week. So I thought, okay, everyone's chasing that league-winning upside at running back. What's wrong with these 3 through 6 guys? And it turns out they're just a lot older to begin with. They're often 25, 26 years old, which that doesn't sound that old. I'm older than that. But when you think about it from a running back's perspective, if they're coming in the league at 21, 22, and they're 25, 26, they're already beaten down and they're basically at the end of their first contract, if not on their second contract. They have a lot of wear on the tires. They're probably a lot older. And that right there, this is past the age apex where generally 25, 25 and a half is when a running back has his final most productive seasons and then kind of declines. So you're basically getting guys on the age decline. The other piece of this is that these round 3 through 6 running backs are frequently not pass catchers. And that's kind of why they're not a round 1 or round 2 pick, is that people go, this is more of a one-dimensional fantasy asset. And that these one-dimensional fantasy assets at running back, generally they can't be a league winner unless their name is Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, to be a, quote, league winner, had to have 2,000 rushing yards for the 8th time in history with nearly 20 rushing touchdowns. That's what you shouldn't bet on. Now if we turn towards, I guess there's actually one more piece to the dead zone. It's kind of a flimsy role where maybe he's the starter in name only, in that it's kind of an ambiguous depth chart. And the guy isn't super proven, but we think he's probably the starter. So in terms of guys that fit the bill of the quintessential dead zone running back for this year, the first name has to be Mike Davis. He kind of hits everything that you don't want in a running back in this range. He's really old. He's in his late 20s. The role is really flimsy. He's a starter in name only. Almost every other team, if Mike Davis was on the roster, you would say, they have a competent backup running back. 90% of NFL rosters, if Mike Davis is on it, you don't go, of course, they took him to be the starter. So he has the age, which is going against him. He's kind of the starter in name only. He probably has the pass catching work at the least. So he's not like the worst dead zone running back pick in history, but it's a pretty bad one if you look at the trends. Another dead zone running back that's totally different would be a J.K. Dobbins, because J.K. Dobbins is not a first or second round pick. So already he's hitting the dead zone. And then you have to think, well, why is he hitting the quote dead zone? It's because he doesn't catch passes. Yeah, I know he was good at catching passes in college, but this is the NFL. He has Lamar Jackson as his quarterback, and there is not any quarterback that's even remotely close to Lamar when it comes to just a total aversion to targeting the running back. And that's why Dobbins is a round 3 pick. It has nothing to do with his talent. I mean, who are the most talented pure runners in the NFL? It's probably Nick Chubb. And then, I mean, J.K. Dobbins has a case to be the second best pure runner. But the reason that you can't draft him in fantasy and why he looks like a dead zone round 3 back, he's not going to catch any passes. And that, yes, he's also the starter, but there's a heavily involved backup running back in Gus Edwards, who was recently extended and is really good at football too. It is in the Ravens' best interest to play both Dobbins and Edwards. I mean, sure, per touch, Dobbins might be a little better, but you don't want to risk injury with him, and Edwards is so similar per touch that there's no incentive for the Ravens to just completely ride Dobbins unless they're maybe, I don't know, in the playoffs trying to win that game to go to the Super Bowl, in which case, sorry, your regular season for fantasy is already over, so why do you even care at that point? So Dobbins looks like another one on the opposite end. And then the quote dead zone running back that I feel the strongest is not going to be a dead zone running back would be Deandre Swift. I see Wheeler in the chat saying that I love Gaskin. I like Gaskin too. He suffers a little bit from the starter in name only, but I think that the draft was super encouraging with the Dolphins, not ending up with a running back, and Gaskin having an incredibly elite track record in college where he was a 4-year starter and was just an absolute workhorse every year. And he was actually involved in all phases last year, very active in the passing game. So I think Gaskin's okay. But the guy I'm most passionate about is Deandre Swift. Deandre Swift is young, so he checks the age box. It's only his second year. He checks the pass catching box of being involved in all phases. He is I would say a top 5 pass catching running back. I mean, who are the guys that we can definitively say are better than Swift in the pass game? Maybe Eckler, Kamara, CMC. He could be number 4. He's at worst number 5. So right there, Swift has the age, he has the pass catching, and he has the role. There is no world where Jamal Williams is getting more high-value touches and just in general out-touching Deandre Swift. Deandre Swift is a bell cow. The coaching staff even said it this morning. They used the word bell cow apparently when referring to Swift. They said this is the guy that's going to get a lot of the carries. This is the guy that's going to be the most active in the passing game. So Deandre Swift checks every single box that you want in a running back. And there's 2 reasons that I think, or there's one reason that I think he's in the dead zone. Or I guess there's 2 reasons I think he's in the dead zone. And then my 2020 player comp for him. So we'll start with the 2020 player comp. How is Deandre Swift any different than 2020 Miles Sanders, who was a round 1, round 2 turn pick? This was a year 2 running back in Miles Sanders who flashed in the receiving game and was super efficient, just like Swift. And we crossed our fingers and said, I hope Sanders is more active in the running game as well. Sanders ended up being incredibly active in all phases. He had the 6th highest per game opportunity share among running backs. His issue was his offense was so atrocious and he suffered a case of the drops. He had nearly a 50% catch rate. So that's kind of what nuked Sanders. But Swift looks just like that. But he's not going at the 1-2 turn like Sanders. He's going in the mid to late 3rd at this point. And you might say, well, why is that? I think there's 2 reasons. One of them, this narrative that the bad offense is bad for the running back, which is true when the running back isn't a pass catcher. You can't game script out Deandre Swift, no matter how good or bad the team is. And then the other portion of this is that we're talking about the running back dead zone right now. Did anyone guest on your podcast and talk about the dead zone last year? I suspect not. And if you had someone on, that was incredibly progressive because nobody was talking about the running back dead zone last year. There's such a short history of fantasy football, hardcore strategy and analytics. So yes, this summer when everyone researches the dead zone, of course receivers get elevated and running backs get pushed down psychologically. So there's just so many reasons why I am passionate that Swift will buck the trend of dead zone running back, and that I'm not ashamed to have more than my token 8% exposure to a player like Deandre Swift in basically every format.
Theo, before you keep the goodness going, maybe Dan will throw him some great questions here. But like our buddy Wheeler's saying, guys, smash the like. I mean, this is some serious goodness that Josh is bringing to the table here tonight, and just some good in-depth analysis on topics that we're all curious about this time of year.
Yep, absolutely. So while I still have internet here, which has been fading in and out on a regular basis,
as he freezes.
Yes, man, I'm the freeze king tonight.
I'll go. We can hear you, man. Keep going. We can hear you.
All right. Anyway, so Josh, who are some of your main targets in redraft? Who are you really looking to get? I mean, obviously, it sounds like Swift is one of them, but who are some other guys that you think are just absolute smashes at ADP right now?
So I really like Davonte Adams and Tyreek Hill, which is funny because I've historically been a big running back in the first round kind of guy. I think this year it's shaping up where their target shares are so consolidated. I mean, who is Tyreek Hill competing with? It's just him and Kelsey. There's really like Watkins is gone. Hardman is a situational field stretch gadget type guy. And then with Adams, they're basically just running it back. They grabbed a slot receiver in Amari Rogers. Apparently they want Randall Cobb back. None of these look like moves that say we want to give Adams fewer than his 30% target share. So I think those are two great picks in the first round that aren't your typical, you have to go running back round one. Second round, I mentioned before, Waller. I think Waller is just such a great pick in the non-tight end premium formats where you can get him in the second round. Where when I did my projections, Waller ended up being closer to Kelsey than he was to Kittle. And that there's actually a bigger break between Kittle and Waller than there is Waller-Kelsey. I was actually surprised by that, but I mean, Waller's target share is upper 20%, and he's on a decently high volume pass attack. The other second round guy, and I cannot believe this is the guy that I have a ton of in redraft, is Najee Harris, a guy I have totally faded and have zero of in Dynasty because I don't like how old he is. I don't like the direction this team is going. I'm not even convinced that he's that good of a prospect in a vacuum. But for this year, I mean, which running back is more teed up for 300 plus touches with some receiving work than Najee Harris? I can't really think of anyone that I can confidently say is going to have a better ratio of carries and targets. Like, sure, Henry's going to get more carries, but we know how valuable targets are, and that I'd probably take, if you're just doing baseline carries plus targets, Najee Harris might have the best, most projectable combination of those two in the entire NFL this year. And he's frequently going at the end of the second, sometimes early third round. And I get it, the offensive line's not great, but the Steelers, this is a team, every year they try and ride the running back. Najee Harris is a pretty good one. He's way better than James Conner was. Remember all those Le'Veon Bell years? This really looks like a situation where you're getting 275 to 300 carries and 40 to 60 targets in the late second, early third. Going a little later in drafts, I mentioned it before, I love Tyler Lockett. People just assume, Tyler Lockett's going to get you 250 fantasy point performances and burn you every other week. That's not really how this works. What's more predictive is that he had a super high target share and had 100 receptions last year. I don't care how he did it. All I know is that he did it. And that historically, we shouldn't worry. It's just like, remember Will Fuller? We couldn't crack Will Fuller. We never knew when Will Fuller was going to go off. And then last year, suddenly he gets a more sustainable target share and just crushes it. That's kind of the Tyler Lockett thing, where these guys that are super volatile, when they're locked into a certain role, it generally doesn't last. I expect him to fully rebound, have another 100 catch type season, and be more consistent. Then the final one is Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne has the best of both worlds. Think about how we always want the mobile quarterback when it comes to yards per carry. And we say, oh, you have to get the Konami quarterback with that running back. Man, imagine how the linebackers are focused on the quarterback. That's going to open up rushing lanes for the running back. But then the naysayers go, oh, but those mobile quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson, they don't target the running back. Why would you dump the ball off when you can just run for 10 yards? Fortunately, we have the best of both worlds with Lawrence, where Lawrence is a mobile quarterback that should help out Etienne's efficiency. And spoiler alert to everyone fading Etienne, Trevor Lawrence gave him nearly 50 catches and almost 600 receiving yards last season. So we don't even have to worry about the mobile quarterback not targeting the running back because we've seen it. They've been teammates for 3 years. So those are all the guys that I am vigorously drafting early and often right now in my drafts.
Is it a coincidence that Etienne's best comparable is Swift on the PP site?
I believe it. I feel like it's probably reflective of not just that they're similar players in many ways with their production, frame, but also that this pass catching running back in college didn't always used to be a thing. So these guys that have these outrageous target totals in college, that's not how it used to be. You can look up a guy like LaDainian Tomlinson, who had a 100-catch season in the NFL, and you'd be shocked. I don't even think he had 20 catches in any college season. So that's kind of a newer school thing, the super hyperactive in the pass game running back. So a lot of these guys start to look more comparable to each other, these recent running backs.
And is there anybody a little later in drafts that you're really targeting? Maybe a late round guy or a mid round guy?
So a few of the guys that are in kind of those middle to late rounds, I mean, I really like Emmanuel Sanders. I know there's a lot of people out there, they are hardcore Gabe Davis fans. And I don't get it. Gabe Davis is getting drafted ahead of the two receivers that are ahead of him on the depth chart. I mean, Gabe Davis is behind Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders. I don't quite understand why people are taking him first. It's not like he's even this hyper talented player. He's a day 3 rookie who ran exceptionally pure with touchdowns. You don't know who else had 7 touchdowns their rookie season, and 1 in 5 of their catches was a touchdown? Anthony Miller. Remember Anthony Miller? There was a little bit of Anthony Miller hype where it was like, oh, you had a pretty good rookie season. No, we didn't. You just had 7 touchdowns. Get over yourself. That's the Gabe Davis thing. 7 touchdowns. People just love 7 or more receiving touchdowns, whatever it is. There's something about it where it just feels like they had such good spike weeks. And then you realize that Gabe Davis had a 10% target share and is still the 4th option on the depth chart. So I really like Emmanuel Sanders, where for some reason he's often the 4th Buffalo receiver off the board. He and Beasley kind of oscillate based on whatever Beasley's Twitter posts that week are. And Sanders, I mean, he's going to be the number 2 option there most likely. He's had close to a 20% target share the past few seasons, and that should probably continue in a super high volume offense. And then 2 super late running backs that I think you should target anytime you feel like you need another running back in your draft. Ty Johnson still has a shot to be the starter in a few games this year. Do we really think that undersized day 3 rookie Michael Carter is going to start every single game? I don't think so. Tevin Coleman, the guy that hasn't been relevant for 2 seasons and is getting old and can't stay healthy. Do we think that's the other guy that is just such an insurmountable obstacle? Insert Ty Johnson, who's still young, had 2 games last year with 6 targets. So we know that he has pass game abilities. And when he got the carries last year in his 1 game, he had over 100 rush yards. So I like that he has the rushing ability and the receiving ability. The other guy is Jerick McKinnon. I think I mentioned him before very briefly. I think he's a smash right now. I believe he's going to grab that number 2 running back chair from Darrell Williams, who's not really good at anything other than somehow he just gets out on the field. I'm not quite sure how he's the magician of Darrell Williams and his 4.7 40 time and lack of pass catching ability. who's just always out on the field. I really think that's going to be McKinnon's role. And we know he's a good pass catcher. And we know that he can be a dynamic runner when called upon. He had many big weeks last year with the Niners. So why can't he do it again this year? It seems like he's going to be just one more year removed from his surgeries. He could be healthier this year than last year. So McKinnon's the other late round guy, very late, that I think you should really be scooping up.
My last pick in the fishbowl was McKinnon, and same reasons.
Same.
I mean anyone in that KC offense, especially when it's at the end of a draft. You know, and like you said, I mean Darrell Williams basically being the competition in there. Let's throw a quick OTC. Wheeler was a huge participant tonight in the chat. He wanted to know about one last OTC here with CeeDee Lamb and McLaren, two guys with a lot of hypes going into this season.
I'm going CeeDee Lamb, but it's close.
Yeah. Awesome. Theo, anything we didn't, I know we kind of we're at $1.25. We weren't polite enough to ask Josh if he had a curfew or if his girlfriend's waiting for him or anything like that.
I want to quickly get Josh's fades. You don't have to do the whole draft, but give me a couple guys in the first few rounds that you are very hesitant about and you think could really flop this season at ADP.
So we talked about him a little bit with the Taylor Chubb dichotomy. I think Chubb has been a fade for me kind of this whole offseason and still is, just because he doesn't quite get as many touches as people seem to think he does. Like, he's not Derrick Henry in the running game with his workload. He's rarely hitting 20 carries, and he's not involved in the passing game at all. So I think Chubb, it's a tough case to see him outperforming his ADP dramatically. I think he's a really safe pick in the sense, I mean, how could Chubb bust? Because he's so good at football. But I just really don't see any type of league-winning upside with him. And I'd rather just go receiver where they get injured less, they're more stable, or another running back that has higher upside because they have pass game involvement. Another one, I think I mentioned before, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. A little tough to draft them when I can grab Antonio Brown several rounds later. And right now it seems like he's going to have a very similar role in the offense. J.K. Dobbins, I mentioned before. He's another guy that I'm fading in the third round. And then this one's really painful. DJ Moore is on my fade list. I do not quite understand why Sam Darnold, who has always been a horrible quarterback and has never really supported all that much fantasy relevance of anybody, is suddenly going to help CMC be the RB1 in fantasy, DJ Moore be a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1, Robbie Anderson as a wide receiver 2 type. And then, I forgot. Terrace Marshall is supposed to be really good too. So he's really going to eat in that offense. Yet the only time we've seen Darnold support anyone fantasy relevant was, remember that half season? I think it was like a half season of Robbie Anderson. There was at one point Robbie Anderson and Darnold had a few good games. That's about it. I just don't see how him going to a new system where we always talk about, you have to fade the quarterback on the new team. But Darnold, it's okay because he got away from Gase. I mean, really, do we think Gase is just that incompetent that he ruined Darnold and that Darnold was actually some superstar? I think Ryan Tannehill and his success post-Gase is kind of the reason that DJ Moore's ADP is so high. And I just don't like buying into Tannehill did it, so Darnold's going to do it, when Tannehill was actually a far more competent quarterback over a larger sample size than Darnold. So I don't see it with DJ Moore. I mean, he didn't even have as many targets as Robbie Anderson. He wasn't even the target leader on the team last year. We don't even know what to expect. So he's one of my favorite players. I have a lot of him in Dynasty, but in redraft, I can't pull the trigger in the late 30s, early 40s. And then the last guy, this is often the most controversial because he has such staunch supporters because of the measurables. And I get it. I work at Player Profiler, but I'm about to fade Noah Fant, even though he's a 99th percentile athlete at the tight end position. And you might say, well, how can you fade Noah Fant when he's a 99th percentile athlete at the tight end position? It's actually quite simple. For a tight end to truly break into that upper echelon and to become a Waller, a Kittle, a Kelsey, you have to be the number 1 or number 2 option in your pass attack preferably the number one option. I mean, Kittle, Kelsey, Waller, they've kind of been the number one option. That's kind of why I like Hawkinson in many ways, that Hawkinson looks like probably the number one option in Detroit. Those targets are his. Fant is, I mean, I don't even know what he is. He's probably the number 3 option there behind both Sutton and Jeudy. And it's probably a run-first offense. And you might say, well, how can it be a run-first offense when there's Sutton and Jeudy and Fant? I'll tell you how. I saw the NFL draft unfold. I saw the Broncos pass on Justin Fields and then trade up for Javonte Williams in the second round. If we're going to buy into any kind of narrative, that sounds a whole lot like a team that wants to run the ball more. You pass on the franchise quarterback and then trade up for a running back. So if you're telling me that this is going to be potentially a run-heavy team where Noah Fant is the 3rd receiving option on that team, and it's already, we don't like the quarterbacks, what is Noah Fant's path to difference-making upside? I think he's very safe in the sense that, yeah, he's going to have probably 550 to 700 receiving yards. But I just don't see any type of difference-making upside. And there's so many other tight ends later on and receivers and running backs in that range that I think have a much clearer path and don't need injuries to strike to greatly exceed their ADP. I just can't fathom a world where Fant greatly exceeds his ADP unless Sutton or Jeudy goes down for most of the season. I mean, even last year, Sutton was out for the whole season. Noah Fant wasn't winning you any leagues.
I thought that was great stuff.
100% agree. 100% agree. Give me Gronk at his ADP over Fant.
You're muted.
JD's muted.
Yep.
No, all good. Dan, keep going. I just because his picture froze. I didn't know if you guys were hearing. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd much rather have like a Gronk or a Gerald Everett or somebody like that at their ADP than Fant at his ADP. I mean, to me, Fant's a fine player, but his ADP is just way too rich for me. We just have, as you said, Josh, we just haven't seen him really, become a primary option in that offense. He's always been, at best secondary and usually tertiary.
I'll actually butt heads with you guys on this. I'm willing to draft Noah Fant kind of around his ADP. I still think he's, like you said, he's an exceptional athlete. He's flashed in a number of games. I can see the reservations where Judy's going to command a ton of targets, but I do have some apprehension on Sutton coming back from injury. And I will take some bets on Fant, but I do think he's priced kind of at the top of the range where I would consider him.
Yeah, he's at the top of that tier. And I was going to say, Dan, just following in Josh's boss's footstep, I think we need to adjust the title, maybe fading Fant like a boss is Josh Larky tonight, because I got to be honest, and again, I'm a bit limited these days, but I have not heard that take anywhere when it comes to Fant, and I think a lot of our listeners are in tight end premium leagues. Namely the FFPC, myffpc.com, by the way. And that's why I want to bring attention to that because, you talked about Goddard, and I think that people are fading Goddard maybe in that range, and they're very similar. They're usually going in the same round because of the uncertainty in Philly. So as much as you have that uncertainty in Denver, interesting to know that you're fading it all together.
Yeah, and I think I am 100% faded on Fant. I don't think I own a single share anywhere.
Theo, why is Dan freezing while he's grabbing his neck, and why is this the first we hear that he's fading Fant? I don't know. Is he holding back as we draft with him? Is that what's going on?
No, I think it's in FFPC. It's an interesting argument because Fant's going in like the 7th round, so it's an opportunity cost thing where. Like Josh said, it's other players around him. Whether it's a quarterback, some of these running backs, that's kind of a very nice place to draft a wide receiver as well. So Goddard and Fant are kind of weird. They're in their own little tier in FFPC. And then like Logan Thomas, once in a while, Logan Thomas goes behind each of them. And once in a while, you'll have a drafter who loves Logan Thomas where he'll creep into like that very end of the 6th or 7th as well. So it's kind of a weird tier of tight ends to begin with. I can see the kind of reservations about each one of them, and the upside on each of them as well.
Yeah, I would definitely take Logan Thomas there because yes, Terry McLaurin's clearly number one there, but I mean, I really like Samuel. I think he's a fun player. He's dynamic. He's not practicing right now. He's injured. He's switching teams. So there's a lot going against Curtis Samuel. He's also never been more, or we've never really seen him succeed other than this past season when this last year he crushed it. But he was also the third option in that offense. You could even say he was the third option in the pass game, fourth overall option, even behind Mike Davis. So I think that Logan Thomas has a pretty decent chance to end up being the number 2 option behind McLaurin there in what I think is going to be a better passing attack in Washington with Fitzpatrick than with Bridgewater or Locke. So that's why I would take Logan Thomas and why he's actually a tight end that I'm slightly above consensus on. And then his recent extension was kind of icing on the cake for me, where I already felt like he had a pretty secure role. And then when the extension happened, I was like, you know what? They think that he's their tight end of the future and that whatever this very weird contention window that they're in, where they're kind of doing the bridge quarterback while also sort of looking like the best team top to bottom in their own division. It's kind of strange. But that whatever this unique contention window is, that Logan Thomas does look like a focal point of it. And that I think he right now looks like their number 2 option in the receiving game.
This is shout out back-to-back weeks of us talking with Logan Thomas.
I was going to say Jack's Falcone, right?
Jack Falcone's all over Logan Thomas as well. So this is
who did he compare him to, Theo? I was trying to remember, like breakout wise. Who was he comparing him to? Was it Kittle?
Waller.
It was Waller. It was Waller. You're right.
Waller, and he put asterisks on that and he scaled it back. But in terms of what they are athletically, it was Waller and a couple other factors. So that was pretty cool. And shout out to Cody Carpentier in the room watching. That's awesome to see.
Yeah, I think that with Thomas, I've actually made the Waller comparison. And the way I've made it is I actually don't think their skill sets are particularly similar. But with Darren Waller, we all saw it. He was ridiculously good in 2019. And then what did we all say? We're like, I don't know. Is his role secure? They took Henry Ruggs. Let me see it again. So then he goes in the 6th round and was one of the 2 or 3 biggest league winners that you possibly could have drafted last year. I don't see that happening with Logan Thomas, but I think it's kind of like the Waller light situation where Logan Thomas commands well over 100 targets, is one of the focal points of this offense. And people are going, well, it's kind of an unconventional path. He's an old tight end. He's kind of old. He's in his late 20s somehow. What happened to him? Just like with Waller, it's like, oh, he's like 28 now. What happened? Why do we like this guy? I think it's a flash in the pan. And I think that's the big parallel I see, is that I thought Logan Thomas was for real and that people seem to be wanting to say, I have to see it again. We saw what happened with Waller. He just got a lot better. Year 2 as a full-time tight end, turns out you can make a pretty big leap. And I mean, Logan Thomas could make that leap. I think it's less likely, and I think his leap wouldn't be as great. But it's the idea that right now you're drafting him in a place where people are assuming that there's no more room for growth. If not, even he'll regress slightly from last season. Right now he's being drafted well below where he finished last year. And I'm just not ready to write off Logan Thomas as 2020 was the ceiling year when he just transitioned to tight end.
Yeah, to me, that's the key right there, Josh, is he just transitioned to tight end, so there's still room, whereas your standard, 28, 29, 30-year-old tight end, he's on the downside. But you can have those guys who transition late, like Waller and Logan Thomas, and they're still, kind of getting things figured out. And so there's possibly even room for improvement even now.
Yeah. 100%.
And his metrics are no joke either.
Do
a check out player profiler. I mean, he's basically what we hoped Austin Safarian Jenkins would become. The best comparable on player profiler, and he basically, very similar actually storylines, even narratives behind the two players.
He is one of those 3-syllable guys. It's not athlete, it's athlete. You know,
that's only in Minnesota, Dan. All right,
that is probably true.
Guys, we're at $140, and Larky's expensive. So let's face it, man. He's not cheap. No, I'm joking, man. Honestly, I'll let Theo and Dan add anything that we haven't touched that maybe we missed that they really want to ask. Maybe when they do their little exit. But I want to thank you, Josh. You're not only are you generous with your time, you're just a good guy to deal with, man. You're a nice guy. You're super smart. I really appreciate where you're taking certain aspects of this industry. I think I love when people take it in a new direction, you know, and I feel like you're doing that. Dude, tonight's been awesome. It's been awesome. I'm sure anyone listening will agree. Guys, smash the like. You know, Josh has brought a lot of goodness tonight. And check out his articles. We talked about the stacking guide. I mean, this is like the 101 of stacking. This is a must read. Go to playerprofiler.com and check out Josh's article. Check out Codebreaker. And Josh, anything I missed? Anything else you want to add before we close this out?
No, I think you nailed it. You can find me on Twitter at JLarkyTweets. My DMs are open, so if there's something that you can't find, you can always just shoot me a DM. And I'll try to get back to you pretty quickly. Thanks for having me. I was pretty excited to be able to come back on. We've got Josh in the chat. Yes, the Burrito King. For those who don't know, I eat a lot of burritos. But yeah, thanks for having me. I was really excited to do round 2 because I thought this was one of the most fun shows, if not the most fun show that I'd guested on kind of all off season. So I really enjoyed it because I think of you guys as kind of like,
we had to give you some air horns tonight, and that seemed like the right spot.
I think of you guys as kind of like the pioneers that set the groundwork for me, where you've been playing fantasy a lot longer than I have. You've been out in these streets way longer than I have. You've been playing higher volume longer than I have. And that, how did I think to write a stacking article? It's because there's a lot of buzz around stacking. I'm sure you guys have been stacking for years. It's not like you read my article and were like, oh, I should stack. So what I'm doing is really just connecting the dots in many ways, and that you think of me as being innovative with my research. And I kind of think of you guys stacking in the first place as innovative when naive me several years ago was not a stacker. 4 years ago, I did not stack because I was sure you should hedge. Like, it's like the stock market. You have to hedge. So that's what I think is kind of the one point of that you didn't bring up, is that I don't really necessarily see myself as super innovative because I'm just taking strategies that other people have talked about and then figuring out if it has merit or not. And then in the case of stacking, the merit is there. So yeah, thanks for having me.
You nailed it. Whichever the intention, you definitely nailed it. And I'm sure the people listening echo the appreciation that we want to share with you and express with you for your time tonight. Theo, I'll go to you next. Just, you had a nice plan when it came to Josh coming back on the show tonight. What did you think of the show, and anything else you want to share with the peeps before we close Bad Boy out?
No, I thought it was great for Josh to come back on. We had such an awesome show with him the first time that now we're getting close to the nitty gritty. It was great to have him come on and give his guys, and definitely check out Josh's pods. They're super informative. The Dead Zone one was my favorite, but they've all been great. And definitely check out that stacking article. I retweeted this morning. It is like one of the best things I've read in a long time. And this was awesome. I can't think of a better way to start out August than what we just put out there for the GOAT District.
Yeah, and before I go to Dan, Theo, we have some more goodness coming this week on Thursday.
No, it's actually.
Sorry, next week. Sorry, just sorry. Give a quick preview. I'm mixing my 2 weeks up. August to me is like the next 3 weeks. I'm off for a lot of it, so it's like a blur. But just give the people some hints on who's coming up, man. We got some more VIPs coming up.
Well, Dan can help me out with this, but I know next week Dwayne McFarland comes back on. And
Todd.
we also have Todd. And we have a couple other pods kind of in the mix, but the dates have not been set. But we have some great guests coming on for August for sure.
Guys, July was loaded, and August is no different. Dan.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'm really going to be excited to rewatch this so I can catch the half of it that I missed while I was froze up. But seriously though, it's just a pleasure to have you on, Josh, because what I really like about you is you've got that natural curiosity that you really need to have to to become one of the best in the fantasy football industry, and just you ask questions all the time and then you chase down for the answers, and that's really all. You're talking about us that have been in the game for a long time, and you're doing exactly the same things that we've always done, and that's the only way that you can possibly improve is just to have that level of curiosity and to be tenacious about chasing it down and finding out whether you're right or you're wrong or somewhat on the right track or whatever. So appreciate that. It's you're a joy to follow because of the fact that you're always doing that. And you find some things that I see and I'm like I wouldn't have thought of that. That's a great question to ask, and then I get to see you answer it too. So absolutely a very, very worthwhile follow, whether you've been in the game for a long time or a short time.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man, for sure. Tonight was great. Guys, it's an important time of the year. And like we said, you're tuning in for a reason. We hope that we helped you on this kind of adventure through the off season, which is always kind of tricky. You don't want to give too much weight to the headlines. You want to fine tune your strategies depending on the formats. And we're hoping that we're helping you out with that, getting those little edges. And a guy like Josh, I mean, the goodness he brings is, it's what's the word I'm looking for? God damn, Dan, I'm thinking in French again. Help me out, brother. Invaluable. Is that the word I'm looking for? It's invaluable, guys. No, seriously, like just the in-depth. And like you said, Dan, that curiosity is what leads all of us down the same track that he's going with these great thoughts and the analytics of it. So again, we appreciate Josh. Check out his goodness. Check out Player Profiler, the Breakout Finder, all the goodness that he's bringing analytics wise to fantasy. Guys, Overhyped Sleeper and Theo, the OG, these guys similar, just bringing goodness, whether it's them drafting, whether it's them tweeting, whether it's them replying to a trade question that you're asking them. Make sure you tag these guys on your question, tag the GOAT District. And again, smash the like, guys. We're trying to do everything we can to help you win, going into 2021. This is fun. It's great talking strategy. It's great going against, zigging when people are zagging. At the end of the day, we want to win. We want to win the league. We want to win the money. We want to win the title. We want to be able to brag. And that's what we're here to bring. This is one part of this channel. We've got Shelly, Mr. Schellenberg, Andrew, with Theo dropping the $250,000 billies, the $500,000 billies. We had the Ship Chasers. We had a back-to-back FFPC champ on here, $750,000 the man won playing fantasy. So again, guys, the biggest guests, the biggest winners on this channel. Make sure you tune in. Make sure you get all the goodness. We'll be back next week for a little more GOAT District, a little back-to-back goodness, as Theo shared with you guys. Be safe, be happy. And as we say every week, guys, we'll check you all later.
GOAT District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be trading. And I always be trading. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.